Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of Coastal Catch Ups. Today I speak with Donal, who works for Fair Seas Ireland, and Donal gives us an insight to the work they're doing in order to push forward legislation to get marine protected areas designated around Ireland. So I hope you enjoy the episode. It's not too technical, don't worry. If I know when I mentioned legislation, you maybe sighed and went, "Oh, okay," but no, this is a good chat, and you'll learn lots about our waters and the process behind what Fair Seas are doing. So, hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll catch you soon.
It's all about marine and the coastal sea, aquatic life and everything in between. So sit on down and take a seat. Coastal catch-ups with Sam P.
I was wondering if we could start by getting a bit of background to yourself and your relationship with the coastline.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on, Sam. So yeah, my name's Donal Griffin. I'm living in Tyrone at the minute, in West Tyrone, and a little village called Drumquin. And I'm from Clannabogan, but so not quite near the sea or on the coast. But I fell in love with the sea actually much later in life than a lot of people. A lot of people have stories of going rock pooling and when they were kids and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's not my story. I was actually did was at Queen's University in Belfast and was doing biological sciences, and I thought I wanted to be a teacher actually. Or I did want to be a teacher at the time. And when I was doing the biological sciences course, I was drawn as the first year went on, I was drawn more and more towards the environmental modules and options of different classes that I had. And within that, again, I was drawn towards the classes that had this field work, this field element. So Queen's University have a fantastic marine lab down in Portaferry on the shores of Strangford Lough, and I ended up spending quite a bit of time down there. So I've often told people in the past I fell in love with the sea on the rocky shore of Strangford and Portaferry. So that's, and I never looked back then. I changed my course from biological sciences to marine biology, graduated there. I did a master's degree with my thesis, and my research project was on basking sharks. And that's when about 14 years ago now, actually, I started volunteering my time with the Irish Basking Shark Group, and I'm a coordinator with the Basking Shark Group now, as well as my day job with Fair Seas Coalition, but we'll get on to that. And then, yeah, since then, just kind of did all sorts of odd jobs in terms of marine biology. I've been out at sea doing marine mammal survey work and seabird survey work, environmental science stuff. And then went back in 2014 to do a PhD at Queen's. So I'm a bit of a Queen's lifer, really. And that involved a lot of time spent on the Irish Sea with the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute research vessel, the Christie's. And then since then, after that, I kind of slowly my career trajectory changed from, I guess, the more practical and the fishery science side of it that I was really interested in at the time to the policy side of it. And that's where I've landed now, very squarely in the policy, marine policy, marine conservation policy, and campaigning and advocacy as well for change, for positive change for the marine. So it's been a wild ride, but I'm very fortunate in that I've spent a lot of time in the field and got to travel the world a little bit with on that as well on that basis. But now I'm mostly in my spare bedroom in Dunquin, on Zoom calls.
We'll just imagine a nice seaside uh, picture background there for you, Donal.
That's what I need. I need more of that. There's a in my I'm not in my office now, but in my office at home, there's a lovely jellyfish painting that my a friend of mine did for me, and I did my PhD on the interactions of fish and jellyfish in the Irish Sea. So my friend painted me a lovely compass jellyfish. So it hangs just above my head when I'm on Zoom calls.
Very good. You mentioned about the change between the science, the practical science side, the policy. Did that come about because of a job opportunity, or did you kind of feel? I could imagine being in the policy side, you're kind of driving for change. Is that something you wanted to do then when you made
Uh,
that switch?
I think if I'm being completely honest, I should say yes, shouldn't I? But
Yeah.
it's
No, no, you don't. You shouldn't say yes. It's
the honest answer is no, that it came about completely by chance, really. Because as I said, I finished my PhD in 2019. In the end, it took me 5 years. Should have took me a bit shorter than that, but that's the way things go. And at that time, had moved to England. My wife had got a job in England, and she's was in academia as well. So you kind of have to just go where you can when you're in academia and in a relationship. So, and when I went over there, there was one marine bell. I was in the middle of Nottinghamshire. So again, it couldn't be further from the coast. And there was one marine biology job came up, like I swear, 25 minutes down the road from me. And when I first saw it, I was like, is this a mistake? What is going on here? Why is there a marine conservation job 25 minutes down the road here in the heart of Nottingham? Like when you're just surrounded by wheat and barley and maize kind of thing. And it was because it was for the Wildlife Trust that I work. And the Wildlife Trusts are a fantastic charity organization across the entire UK. There's 46 different independent trusts, and they all kind of come together then and have a central team called the Wildlife Trust. So I got a job for the central team that was based in Nottinghamshire, but it was a central team role in marine conservation. So that was fantastic because it was just down the road for me, of course. But it was actually a brilliant opportunity because I got up, I was embedded then not only in the the marine conservation side of England where I was living, but actually the whole of the UK was plugged into what was happening in Scotland and Wales and even Northern Ireland, which I was, excited about coming from Northern Ireland. So and that got me not only to know the issues, but to know people and to connect to people all around the UK. And many of them I'm still very much friends with. I was actually at a conference recently and met up with quite a few of them, which is really nice. And that's I left the Wildlife Trust back in early 2020, so 4 years ago. So so that's kind of and that job, I should say, then with the Marine Conservation Officer job, it had an element of policy in it. It wasn't it wasn't complete policy job, or a campaigning or an advocacy job, but it had elements of all those. So it was a really good opportunity to kind of get to know and get to grips with all these different elements of marine conservation that I had never had experienced before. My experience with marine conservation was very much a scientific endeavor until that point. So, and then it just went from there to there. I got a job, a similar role came up in Northern Ireland with the Northern Ireland Marine Task Force. And it's a fantastic project ran with Ulster Wildlife and RSPB Northern Ireland, and it's coalition. So there's other partners as well in Northern Ireland, but that's on marine policy, and it's really progressed. It's actually quite an old project now. It started about maybe 17 years ago, which is a really long running project when you think about the ENGO sector, the charity sector. But it's absolutely fantastic work and paved the way for uh, as a leading example, even at the UK level. So I did that for a while, and then I moved now to where I am, Fair Sea. So a very similar job again, a coalition of NGOs and charities and networks in the Republic of Ireland, and we are advocating and campaigning for change, as you said, to do with marine policy. And the big issue down south at the moment is the new forthcoming marine protected area legislation for Ireland. So that's what keeps me and my team busy these days.
What is the driver behind that? I saw a target mentioned, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, so well, firstly, I guess Fair Seas is a coalition of different ENGOs, so environmental non-governmental organizations in the Republic. So we have 7 different partners, or coalitions made up of 7 different partners. And I'm sure your listeners will know a lot of them. There's the Irish Whale Dolphin Group, Birdwatch Ireland, Irish Wildlife Trust. There's Streamscapes. There's Coastwatch, um, the Sustainable Water Network, the Irish Environmental Network. So I think that's them all. Didn't miss any. So and these are all organizations that have been working on conservation and also marine conservation issues in Ireland for decades. So I'm really lucky to be working with a whole host of organizations that have that experience and breadth of knowledge and know-how, and credibility as well, that I can leverage. To be completely honest, that's the point, and that's the usefulness of a coalition. So,
Mhm.
but Fair Seas came together about 3 years or 3.5 years ago now. It's the first of its kind project in Ireland, um, of these NGOs coming together to work specifically on marine protected areas. Um, and there has been coalitions of other kinds, of course. There's lots of coalitions in Ireland when it comes to NGO, but has a focus on marine, and in particular marine protected areas. And it came along at the right time, because, as you said, the current government in the Republic, in their program for government. So what they have stated they want to do in the lifetime of their own coalition government is to designate 30% of Ireland seas as a marine protected area by 2030. So that's in line with lots of different agreements now. Most latestly, the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity agreement last December, or over a year ago now. The post 2020 Global Framework for Biodiversity. It's in the EU Biodiversity Strategy. It's in yeah, it's the target now when it comes to biodiversity. It's protected areas, protecting 30% of our sea on land. Sorry, protecting 30% of our areas on land and at sea. So, and that's the government is committed to that. So in that sense, we were pushing on an open door. The
Mhm.
government had agreed to do something, and we were there to make sure that they did it, or they will do it, and that they will do it right in the right way. So I guess for the Irish government perspective, how were they going to achieve that 30 by 30 target? Because back in 2020, and even up until about 18 months ago, the Ireland's marine area, in its totality, which is quite big, which is its exclusive economic zone is quite big. Uh, there was only 2.1-ish% of that whole marine area as designated as a marine protected area, and that was either a SAC, and a special area of conservation, or an SPA, a special protection area. So those are just two different types of MPA. I know there's a lot of jargon here, but
Mhm.
it's just it can get quite technical.
Mhm.
So that was quite low, and that's actually one of the lowest percentage coverages of all the member states in the European Union. So the government were thinking, right, well, how are we actually going to increase that to 30% in less than a decade?
Mhm.
And one way, quite rightly, that they identified in doing that was through the creation of a new law that would allow Ireland to designate new marine protected areas on a national basis and not through EU basis. Because
Mhm.
SACs and SPAs are born out of EU legislation, whereas this new forthcoming legislation will allow Ireland to act on their own unilaterally to designate these areas. And of course, they'll have to consult on various measures to do with management, and the big one being fishing. That will involve cooperation with the EU, but these designations themselves will be will can and will be progressed at a national level. So that's what we're all pinning our hopes on achieving that 30 target. But of course, the target itself isn't anything. The target, really, the overarching aim of the target, is to protect marine biodiversity. A representative, amount and coverage of what we have typically here naturally in Ireland. So I guess that was 2020 when they put that in their program for government. A little while after that, Fair Seas began, and we're in 2024 now, the 2nd of February it is, and the legislation has still the first draft of the bill, the
Hmm.
forthcoming bill has still not been published. So there was a general scheme published of the bill last actually December of 2022. And it went through various steps thereafter, including going through the Joint Oireachtas Committee for pre-legislative scrutiny.
Hmm.
But since and that finished up in March last year, so we're coming up to a year now where we haven't seen any more, and there's been no public advancement of that legislation. So Fair Seas is working very hard to make sure that it stays in top priority for the government and that it stays in the top of people's minds generally in the public. But we do believe there has been some great progress in drafting the bill,
Hmm.
that the bill is ready to be published now and that it's complete. But we just haven't got there in terms of it being published yet. So
Hmm.
that's something that the Fair Seas is very attuned to. But we're being told towards the end of March this year is when we should expect it. So fingers crossed. And then when it is published, that's when the hard work begins, really. It's when to make sure that it is passed through the Irish parliamentary procedures in the Dáil and in the Seanad, the upper and lower houses of Irish Parliament, and enacted into law, and that whatever the final iteration of the bill looks like, through amendments and changes and everything else, that it actually delivers what it needs to deliver, that it actually provides the framework and the structure and the know-how and the resourcing to designate MPAs properly, to manage, enforce, monitor MPAs properly, and for that all to be couched in effective stakeholder engagement, with the likes of ourselves, but more importantly, the local communities on the coast and industry and businesses and groups and everyone that needs to be involved, really. And that's not an easy thing, but it's definitely necessary.
So, is this an opportunity for Ireland to lead the way by the way you mentioned about having its own national legislation? Then the idea is to make it quicker. Is that fair to say, and therefore lead the way in
I
marine
think
protection?
I think it is definitely an opportunity for the Irish government and for Ireland
Hmm.
to 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 really to lead, as you say, and to be a world leader on this. There are many countries around the world that already have national legislation that, in Northern Ireland, for example, you can the government can designate MCZs, so marine conservation zones, and that's under the Marine Act of Northern Ireland of 2013 or something like that. I can't quite remember.
I believe, yeah.
There's a similar one in the UK, the Marine Coastal Access Act. There's a Marine Scotland Act of 2010. So they are all national very in the devolved regions of the UK that allows these MCZs in Scotland, Wales, and England, and then in Northern Ireland, Wales, and England, and then in Scotland, it's they have different names for the different national types of MPAs there. So we wouldn't be leading in the sense that it's not. It wouldn't Ireland wouldn't be leading in the sense of just having this legislation, because there's lots of other countries in the EU and the UK and all around the world that have it. But what they could do now is, because things move on, I guess, and we kind of learn more as we go. Marine protected areas, they're not new, but there's still a lot unknown about the best way and the circumstances in which they should be rolled out, and the benefits, and how and where and when and how much you protect. All these different questions. There's a lot of evidence out there now, but there's also still a lot unknown. So we can actually learn lessons from all around the world now to make our legislation stronger than any other legislations out there. We have no excuses why we wouldn't and couldn't do that. So there is absolutely an opportunity for it to be world leading in the terms of what is included in the legislation. But then even more important than that, I would argue, is Ireland can be world leading in its implementation of
Mm.
the law. because it's one thing to have a law that's good. You might have a law that's bad, but you could have a fantastic law altogether. But if it's not implemented after the fact and it's just left on the shelf and there's no the powers in it aren't, dished out properly, or if the implementation isn't there and the structures for implementation aren't there and there's no money for implementation, then your law is not really any good either. You may as well have a bad law. It doesn't make any difference. So we're thinking about, well, Fair Seas, obviously, at the moment, it's about get the bill published, make the law strong, and then pass it into law. Or sorry, to make the bill strong and then pass it into law. But we are also, of course, thinking about the what comes next, and in terms of implementation and how that piece of implementation is difficult. It's not easy, but as I said, we can learn the lessons and see how other people have done it, and do things that worked well and not do other things that didn't. Um, and that stakeholder piece, that piece about engaging with the communities, and who to engage with, how to do it, at what level do you, and how and what. Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. How do you do effective stakeholder consultation? And there's a lot in that, and it's not. There's no one size fits all. There's probably principles of how you do it well, but there's actually, on the ground, there's not one way you can do it. So it takes a bit of thinking there, and it will probably take a bit of flexibility as well. But what we know is the more effective stakeholder engagement you can, the better it is for societies that are involved, but also actually better for the features you want to protect. Because
Mhm.
with if with good stakeholder involvement comes support of
Mhm.
the site or whatever you're trying to do. It comes, and with regard to MPAs, with that then comes support for the MPA, a level of pride in the local community in the marine protected area and their local area. And with that then comes self reporting, self policing. You're just giving the MPA the best opportunity to be successful then. But if you have a marine protected area on the coast and no one knows about it, so there no one really changes their behavior or pays any attention to what they do or how they treat, wildlife in it, then that's not ideal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there. There's a lot to do, and we're very attuned to what is coming next. But Fair Seas generally. But at the moment, of course, it's very square. Our focus is very squarely on the legislation.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about the work starts once you get this, the real work starts once you get it
Yeah.
implemented. Because I've had experience myself with plans, let's just say, and trying to implement them on the ground. And that's where it's really easy to pay lip service to policies and laws in a report on paper, but actually implementing it on the ground, that's the difficult part. So, um, no, that's looking forward to seeing how that works. And I think we're like you said as well about having a coalition with all these different specialisms around you as well is such an important thing as well, Donal. And at the end there, you also answered one of my questions about the relationship between communities, coastal
Mm.
communities, and the importance of protecting the coastline. Um, self-policing. Every time I hear about self-policing, I'm like, a picture of an angry mob pops into my head, but it's not the case. It's like it's educating community members. It's making them aware of, like you say, the laws and what features they're trying to protect. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think. But just before we did want to chat a bit about communities, but in terms of the actual risks around the coastline and Irish waters, I know there's probably a long list, but for you, what are the main things that need to be honed in on?
Oh yeah, it is a long list. Well, if we start first of all, I mean, when I think of risks and that, I think of threats and pressures. Really, that's what I kind of feel like in the marine environment. And generally speaking, if I can, to bring it back to marine protected areas, like the implementation of marine protected areas, there are lots of marine protected areas up north and down south. Um, some of them are well managed, others aren't. And I think a risk is that we don't manage our marine protected we don't manage marine protected areas well, and that the perception then amongst the public and coastal communities is that they're not worth it, whereas actually, they are worth it. And even an area that you remove pressures from, and the recovery that we would like to see isn't obvious. It takes time, and that actually non-regression further is still a good thing, as opposed to if you hadn't had the marine protected area there at all. The counterfactual argument, well, what state would the environment be there anyway? So I think that the implementation and to make sure we get that stakeholder engagement and communication part right, to concrete the fact in people's minds that marine protected areas are needed and they do work. So that's a more general one. But then when we talk about individual pressures, I think water quality on our coast is a big issue. As I'm not involved, or have never really been involved in water quality kind of science or policy directly. But I know it is a big issue, especially in parts around Northern Ireland, and can have an impact then on the very features around our coast that we want to protect, inside or outside of marine protected areas. Likes of seagrass, or even salt marsh and other reef farming habitats, or individual species. So water quality, but then there's all, and along with that, then pollution, plastic pollution, but also runoff, nutrient runoff from land. So I mean, and then other than that, then from a purely marine perspective, there's fishing, and not fishing, overfishing or unsustainable fishing is a problem. And I think there's been a lot of progress done actually in the Northeast Atlantic and through the EU, the Common Fisheries Policy, and through adhering, not always, but adhering a lot of the time to the advice of the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, ICES, that kind of decide what the quotas are for fishing and total allowable catches and everything. Is that fishing gets a lot of bad press, but actually most fishermen just do what they can, and it's up to government decision making, and it's up to policy making to make sure that that the fishing industry can do is actually sustainable. And there has been a lot of progress, absolutely, in the Northeast Atlantic, but there's still a long way to go. And then the other risk, I guess, is around our coast, and especially in the Irish Sea, for talk about that for a second, is the expansion of offshore renewable energy. That's an industry that is very small at the minute in terms of what infrastructure they have in the water in Ireland, but actually have huge plans, and quite rightly, that's good. And we're all very supportive of offshore renewable energy, providing clean, green, renewable energy for us all to use, for doing everything in our lives. But there's and to, of course, introduce our carbon emissions that we need to do to tackle climate change. Climate change itself, which is going to have an impact on marine biodiversity. So, I mean, this is all good, but it matters again in the way we do it, and it matters what impact it has on the marine environment. And there are impacts the same to what no matter what activity you do in the marine environment, there is a potential impact somewhere. So that's a risk, but I feel like one that can be managed. And for a change, it's a risk that brings its own benefits in terms of the climate and the clean energy and the carbon reduction. So yeah, there's a lot out there to be that we need to be wary of and we need to do right. But there's also lots to be hopeful of. As I said, actually, there's lots of good news stories in terms of the fisheries around the Northeast Atlantic that are actually much better managed now than they used to be, in terms of water quality stuff and how we treat water, and how we and how we manage runoff into the sea, although it doesn't always work great. And we have Lough Neagh as an example of how we have a lot of work to do in Northern Ireland and other places as well. But then also there's lots of fantastic conservation and restoration projects around the coast now in north and south of the border. Oysters, seagrass, salt marsh, flapper skate, um, tuna. There's all these sorts of projects that are going on for to the benefit of marine species, habitats, and ecosystems, and that's just to be welcomed.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we need to focus on, but to always be wary and pragmatic to the dangers and the risks that there are there as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good at this stage when there's good news stories like that coming out, and then there's obviously all this work still to come. So
Yeah.
more stories like this will emerge, no doubt. It was interesting about I'm sure offshore wind developers will be interested in all this legislation if they're trying to pick and choose where they can build, but maybe that's a story for another day, perhaps.
No, you're absolutely right. We talk about it all the time, and it's actually something we try to communicate as well as much as we can. That I think there's a perception out there driven by I don't know who, but that the conservation, the NGO sector are at loggerheads with the wind energy sector. And that's in the Republic. It's certainly not true at all. They're th- they want this MPA legislation through as soon as we do, maybe even
Yeah.
more. They want it in some
Yes.
ways
Yeah.
because it provides them certainty
Hmm.
about what is coming down the line and what they need to do. Because ultimately, these are big, when it comes to offshore wind, these are big companies and they have money, they have resources. You tell them you need to do X, Y, and Z to save the environment, they'll do X, Y, and Z to save the
Hmm.
environment. It's pretty much as straightforward as that. Um, and often they will try to go an extra mile where they can to do, I was at a conference last week and there was talks about different ways to get biodiversity net gain. So when you're um develop having a development at sea, your impact can be negative in terms of okay, you're having a detrimental impact on the environment, or it can be neutral where you have an impact but you mitigate or do what you need or compensate so that overall, in theory, there's no net impact. Or you could have a net gain where actually you do your development, but you do it in such a way and do extra stuff so much so that actually net there's a positive impact there on the environment. So, and that's something that certainly in the UK it seems that the industry are driving and want to know more on so they can do more of that in their own projects and plans. So no, so at the moment at least, very much so, Fair Seas, I'll speak for Fair Seas, are very much in the same place with the wind industry, Ireland, the offshore wind industry down south. We want the certainty, and actually, like us, I bet the wind industry are thinking, God, I wish we had these MPAs all in place now. 10 years ago, so that they would know exactly where these are going to be. So they want the
Hmm.
legislation that'll give the framework, but that still won't give them the answer about where exactly these sites will be. We'll all have to wait a bit longer for that. So we're at the minute we're certainly singing off the same hymn sheet, and it wouldn't surprise me if that went on for longer. But there are risks when it comes to offshore wind. Fortunately, I think they're manageable, and I think we're able to avoid and mitigate them to a very large extent. But we need to do that. We can't just sit on our hands and hope that that happens as well. So that's something that Fair Seas has been doing a little bit of work on, and we're hoping to publish our offshore renewable energy policy position soon. But it's a big piece of work that Aaron's going to have to get to grips with fairly soon.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Looking forward to seeing the policy statement that'll be. Yeah, it's an important issue, like we were saying earlier about climate change and whole uh decarbonizing our energy grids. Like it has to be done some way, and do it in a collaborative way between um, all the different parties, environmental parties, energy groups, is very important. Donal, I was reading a report, or maybe it was an article, and I can't really, it shows how much memory I have, about hope spots.
Mm.
Is that something you know about? And could you tell me a bit more about it?
Yeah, of course. So we have a hope spot. We have, no, that's not the right way to phrase it at all. Fair Seas applied to have a hope spot in Ireland. So hope spots are these areas all around the world that have been assigned by a kind of an ENGO in itself, a conservation charity born out of America called Mission Blue. And Mission Blue is led by the legendary oceanographer and marine biologist Sylvia Earle. So she's kind of a celeb in the marine biology, marine kind of sphere and bubble. And she started this charity and she highlights these areas all around the world that are deserving of the recognition of a hope spot. So these are areas that we can be hopeful for, that if we protect them right and manage them right, that they could be really fantastic areas full of biodiversity and really show what the sea is capable of if we protect them and do things right and don't, get in the way with our own human endeavors and activities and pressures and threats like we just mentioned. So I think there are over 400 hope spots all around the world. I think there's one or two. I think there might be one in Scotland. There was none in Ireland. There's a few dotted around the EU, and there's ones all around the world. But we applied it was 2 years ago now. We submitted, I guess it is, a hope spot in the southwest of Ireland. It was an area of interest that we had identified as being really biodiverse and species rich and abundant in terms of whales, porpoise, dolphins, sharks, seabirds, pretty much every big marine group you had. It was all there down off the southwest, so off the coast of Kerry and Clare. And right enough, it is absolutely fantastic, amazing area with stunning coastline as well. So we gathered all the scientific evidence there, and we submitted that to be considered to be designated as a hope spot or labeled a hope spot, and we were successful. So it was fantastic. So that's the Greater Skellig Coast, includes the Skelligs down off Kerry. It's called the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot, and that it doesn't change anything there. It's a hope spot. It's an ambition, you might say. It's an ambition label. I think there was maybe some confusion at the time when we announced it that this meant that this area was protected or that now management was in place miraculously some way. Well, unfortunately, that was our failing and not communicating that better, because it doesn't mean anything other than it identifies the southwest coast of Ireland as being one of the most important places in the world, you know, for protection from marine biodiversity. It puts it up there in the same category as the Great Barrier Reef. Parts of the Great Barrier Reef are hotspots. There's parts of in the Pacific around those atolls and islands out in the middle of nowhere that are virtually untouched. These are places that are hope spots, and so is a stretch of the southwest coast of Ireland, and rightly so, because we have absolutely amazing biodiversity here off our coast all around the island. So, yeah, it was really exciting, and it still is really exciting, and hopefully, when we get this new forthcoming bill and legislation eventually into law, that there will be in that, because it's quite a large hope spot, this area that we've identified between Clare and County Kerry. Um, there will be at least one designation in there. I'm not convinced that the boundary as we've drawn it will be the boundary of a new marine
Mhm.
protected area. I feel like that's unlikely. But I do believe very much so that within that there will be a designation in there somewhere to protect. I mean, there's just some fantastic bays in there. You have all sorts of sharks, skates, and rays. I think it's a prime candidate for one of maybe the first tranche of new marine protected areas if when we get them maybe in a few years' time. So Yeah, it was an interesting journey, and it was nice, I think, for Ireland to be recognized that actually we are up there. In the big documentaries that we see, you know, I think people think about Australia or they think of South America or in the Pacific or, all this kind of stuff. Whereas actually, when we have them, so the documentaries made around the coast of Ireland, and we have some of the most fantastic marine life that you can imagine, from blue whales, the biggest animal on the planet, right down to or shellfish and our prawns and our fish and cod and tuna now and all sorts. So
It's an awesome initiative, and I think it instills a sense of pride of
mm,
people that find out about it, and like you say, brings it up to the same level as all those sites you typically see in a nature documentary and on the other side of the world. And I think if it brings it up there, it it'll bring people along with your campaign as well. So,
absolutely, and that's actually a really important point that I should have mentioned is that it allowed us then to communicate and talk about this area um in a focused way, and to show, not just to say, oh, this is amazing, but actually no, it's not just us saying this now. This is like the most legendary world-renowned marine biologist that has literally been in every continent in the world looking at marine biology, is taken on trips to see all sorts of the most fantastic marine biodiversity you've ever seen. But from her and her board and her blue mission, that actually she's looked at the evidence and she will actually hear this deserves protection too. So it's been a nice way to communicate with the local communities there, and we've held lots of um kind of local events in that area now, which is really fantastic. And we've actually made a film about the area as well, it's like a 14-minute film that uses the community voice method to speak to local people in the local area about the area, about the sea, and about marine protected areas generally. And it's just fascinating then when you put all that together, the Greater Skellig Hope Spot, the video, the mini film, and it gives it like a um a center of mass then to start those conversations. And what you find then when you start those conversations, that there's way more people interested and want to be involved than you think, that they know way more than you think or you knew, and that there's such an appetite there to protect the sea, and that they are way more attuned to the issues than anyone could be, like the likes of me sitting up in Tyrone, for example. Of course, like, it just makes total sense. So it's a nice way to plug into those people, um, for them to for them to use us in terms of we can bring the hope spot spotlight, but then for us really then, in a two-way transaction, to use them to amplify their calls and wants for protection, and to bring that to the powers that be to hopefully create change. So it has been a really fantastic initiative actually, and we just took a punt, to be completely honest, a couple of years ago, and it worked out, and we're really glad it did, because it's been much more than the sum of its parts now. It's brought us and connected us with lots of other people and stories and opportunities that we just wouldn't have had otherwise.
yeah, that's great to hear about. Those stories are bubbling to the surface once something like that comes to light, and the knowledge it will be in those coastal communities will be vital for the campaign going forward. Just before we finish, you mentioned about the likes of that video being published. If anyone wanted to find out more about Fair Seas, where can they go to find out more and perhaps get involved?
Absolutely. Great question. So we have our website, so it's www.fairseas.ie. So you'll find links to all sorts of stuff there, all our blogs and our communications and our recent press releases and statements. And also you'll find links then to our YouTube channel, which is where you'll find all our videos. So we have the Greater Skellig Hope Spot, the Kingdom of Kerry, video film, it's called. And we also have other videos, similar 10 to 15 minute mini documentaries. One from the Northwest that's premiering next week in Letterkenny, actually. So that'll be exciting. And there's one that'll come later in the year based off of the southeast of Wexford. So you'll find all our videos and content there. And then of course there's our socials. So everything we do then is put up online on our Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and probably others that I'm not aware of. So it's all on there. So yeah, absolutely. Check us out. And then if you want to get involved, you want to support us in our mission, to progress, or well, for Ireland to achieve our 30%, and a big part of that, in our view, being this new national legislation. And we have a petition running at the minute, and it's a petition that you can put your name to, sign up to, support us, and it's calling on the minister, Dara O'Brien, to get on and publish this legislation and to enact it, and to pass it into law. And that's been really fantastic, actually, because we've been running that petition since last September. And in the first, I think it was 4 weeks, it was just under a month, we had 30,000 signatures worldwide, and it was just under 12,000 of those from Ireland. So that was fantastic. We met the minister. We showed, look at the appetite of people in Ireland and around the world that actually want us, Ireland, to do this right. So that's been taken along ever since. The petition, we're sharing it every chance we get. But now in the new year, and we still don't have the bill published, the forthcoming bill published, that we're having a renewed push on that now. So I encourage everyone to look it up, our petition, sign it, share with friends. And if we can get, our aim is to get up near the 20,000 Irish signatures mark over the next 6 weeks. And if we do that, that's just more evidence, and gives the government less excuses, and no wriggle room, that, it's very clear what the Irish people want in terms of looking after our sea. So that would be a huge help. So, and you can also sign out our newsletter. All those details are on our website. So there's lots of ways to get involved, but the newsletter and the petition, that's two good ways to start.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Donal. So yeah, anyone listening that wants to find out more, head over to those online spaces. Donal, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and your passion and the mission that Fair Seas has. Hopefully people listening have found out about, perhaps heard about this for the first time, which is great. Perhaps they just want to find out a bit more about it, which is also welcome. But I just want to say good luck. I'll be keeping tabs on the progress, and yeah, best of luck.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. It was a pleasure talking with you.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode with Donal. The one thing I took away from it is, well, firstly, I'm excited to see, after the bill gets passed in government, the work on the ground that will happen to implement these protection sites. And for me, I'm excited to see how the coastal communities around Ireland get involved in this scheme, and how they can play a role in protecting their own seas along their stretch of the coastline. That's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there. In other news, we have a coastal catch-up happening at the end of February here at Ballyhornan Beach in County Down. So if you're interested in meeting up with some folks for a chat and a walk, feel free to come along. There is a WhatsApp group where I post times and details and do a preliminary weather check a couple of days before. So if you're interested in getting involved in that, feel free. You'll find a link on the website or on any of the social media sites. And lastly, if you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a like or a review or a share, or ping it to a friend that you think might find it interesting. Perhaps they're studying this sort of stuff, or they just have a keen interest in our coastline. So I'd really appreciate that if you could take the time to do that. And that's it for now. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you soon.